Today's program made possible by patrons like you. Welcome to where we celebrate music from the movies. From the golden age to present day, we've got it all covered. We talk to those in the entertainment industry and find out about their favorite scores. You found the podcast, What's the Score? I'm your host, Frank R. Wilson. So sit back, relax, grab a popcorn, and let's see what we'll be hearing today. Recognize that music? It's a favorite of our guest today. He's an award-winning film composer who's had a very busy 2021 with a feature film score for a just-released film called Royal Jelly, which we'll discuss later, as well as several short films. I hope, though, that you'll find his choices of selections very interesting, as well as hearing some of his own compositions as well. Please join me in welcoming Joe Hodgin to the program. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Frank. Thanks for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm very, very excited to talk with you. It's great to talk with the new and up-and-coming composers and to kind of get your feel about things and also to hear your work. And I think our audience will be very interested in that today. I don't know if you've listened to our program before, but it's our tradition at the very beginning. We like to learn a little bit about the person and their background and that sorts of things. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, growing up, school, family, stuff like that.
So, yeah, a little bit about myself. I grew up in small town Alabama. I was born in Mississippi and then moved to Alabama when I was about 7 or 8. And just super small town, like 2 stoplights, small town. Yeah. And started learning to play guitar when I was probably 11 or 12. God bless my mom. She drove me because I was in such a small town. There was no lessons. So my mom drove me like an hour to the nearest city and drove me to my guitar lesson, waited there for an hour during the lesson, and drove me an hour back once a week.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I try to thank her as much as possible. Yeah. Yeah, so I'd always kind of been into music. My older brother, he's like 5 years older. He was huge into music, and so a lot of his influences kind of carried over to me. But anyway, I started playing guitar, and once I started playing guitar, man, that was it. That's like all I did, and kind of got into music production, like recording myself and recording songs at home and. Like nobody, because it was such a small town, nobody I knew how to really play an instrument, maybe 1 or 2 people. So literally the week I graduated, I moved out to Orlando, Florida, where I went to Full Sail University, which is kind of like a vocational trade school. And went there for recording arts and then got my bachelor's in music business. And yeah, came out of school, started working in recording studios, engineering, got really into producing. That's kind of really where my heart was. And then as I was producing, I met like other bands and joined a few bands. And some of the bands got, pretty big. We were doing some pretty big tours and, as most younger bands do, life kind of happened to some of the members of the band.
Yeah.
Yep, life happened, and so ended up kind of transitioning to teaching, and kind of started my own teaching business, and ended up teaching probably for about 5 years.
Teaching music, I take it.
Yes, guitar and
Oh,
piano.
oh, okay. Okay.
Yep, and still producing music on the side, still writing, obviously. And then kind of just to backtrack a little bit, because this will kind of lead into why I love scoring and why I got into scoring. The bands that I were in, I felt like, I was I don't want to say the leader of the band, but the main one, kind of pushing things and pulling things and moving them along, and let's do this, let's go. And like I was saying, kind of life would happen to another member of the band, or someone else in the band was kind of the reason that the band kind of fell apart. So, what attracted me to composing music was that it was all on me. Like I didn't have to rely on anybody else. In a sense, I guess working on a film, it is kind of a team aspect. You're working with a team, but to accomplish my part of the mission, it's all on me, really. Like
I understand.
Yeah, so that's what.
Yeah, in fact, I understand more than you'd know. I mean, I remember I tried playing team sports as I was growing up, and all of a sudden I kind of took up golf, and I ended up loving that because
that's
the same reason you talked about. It's only me. I can't blame anybody else, or I can't praise anyone else. It's up to me. So I totally get that.
That's what attracts me to tennis. Like I'm a huge tennis fan. My dogs' names are Roger and Rafa after Federer and Nadal. Yeah, so huge tennis fan. So yeah, man, because it's all on you. And not that I can't, not that I'm not a team player. It's just
I understand.
Yeah, that's just kind of how I like to operate. But yeah, so I was, I was teaching for about 5 years. Still am teaching. I'll never stop teaching. I just am kind of a natural born teacher. I love showing and sharing things, and I just get a huge fulfillment out of, sharing things with people and showing them how to do something that I love, and sharing my love for things.
Excellent.
Yeah. So, so I was teaching for a while, and then to kind of transition into scoring, it was kind of a random freak accident. Honestly, the sampling company, I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, Spitfire Audio. Do you know who they are?
The name's familiar, but no, I don't really know for sure.
Okay, they're like luxury, like high-end sample libraries for composers. They're used on everything from Queen's Gambit to big Hollywood features. Anywho, they did a scoring competition where they released a clip of the HBO show Westworld without the music, and this was right when quarantine happened, when COVID happened, like when we were quarantined, and I just had nothing to do at the house, and I keep in mind, I'd been writing and producing music for 16, 17 years at that point. And just huge lover of film since I was little, like, just huge film buff. So I was like, why not? I've always wanted to compose music for films. It just kind of seemed like this huge task that I couldn't, that you had to be classically trained to compose music for films. But yeah, so I took a stab at it, and man, I can't tell you how much like I enjoyed it. It really kind of just immediately helped me re-fall in love with music again.
Oh, excellent. That's great to hear. In fact, speaking of music, why don't we dive into one of the cues that you chose? Because I'm excited to hear some of these. I'm not familiar with some of these composers, so I think that's always interesting as well.
Yeah, for sure.
This is from a project called The Queen's Gambit. And the cue you've chosen is called Beth's Story. I'm not familiar with this composer at all. I guess it's a Carlos Rafael Riviera. Is that correct?
Yeah, he did the music for the show on Netflix, Godless. I think that was his first big hit. And the same director that did Godless did Queen's Gambit. And so he composed that as well. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with the show at all, but it was like huge last year. I think it was the biggest watched show on Netflix.
Oh, was this the one about chess?
Yes.
Oh, yes, loved it.
Yeah,
Well,
such a
tell
good
us
show.
tell us why you chose this particular cue as one of your favorites.
Man, I don't know. All of them are great, honestly, but just something about Beth's story is just beautiful. It's very minimalist. I feel like it reminded me kind of like a Thomas Newman piece, which he's like my favorite composer. But yeah, it's just simplistic and just beautiful. I love it.
All right, well, let's have a listen for ourselves. Again, this is from the I guess was it Netflix? I think.
Yep, Netflix.
Yeah, Netflix limited series called Queen's Gambit. The cue is called Beth's Story, and the composer has written it is Carlos Rafael Riviera. You mentioned that you were taking guitar lessons and played guitar quite a bit, but then I also heard at one point you had talked about piano. So when did the piano get introduced to you? Because I would think that would be probably the main instrument one would have to use in order to compose music for a film. And I could be wrong. I know nothing musically. So tell me a little bit about your introduction into piano then.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, I started playing guitar around 11 or 12. And then maybe a year or two into playing guitar, I started kind of translating what I was playing on guitar to piano. Started to realize that, music is just one big language. If you, each instrument speaks the same language. So if you know the notes you're playing on guitar, you know the notes on piano, you can just transfer everything over to piano. So probably around 13, I started kind of self-teaching, and then I started taking lessons on piano. And then, yeah, I mean, you're correct. I pretty much solely compose on piano. And then, I consider guitar my main instrument, but, just how you approach music is completely different on a keyboard than it is a guitar. So,
Not bad.
Yeah, so I end up, usually composing mainly on piano, and then I'll add guitar in later. Unless it's like a really heavy guitar driven score, then I'll kind of base everything around the guitar.
You mentioned being a recording engineer and producing recordings and things of that nature. I had no idea. Is the recording biz, kind of like a big deal in Orlando? Is there a lot of activity going on?
Yeah, I would definitely say just as much as any other big city. I will say it is because it has Full Sail University here, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that school. It's
No.
definitely one of the biggest like vocational like trade schools for recording and music production. It's huge. But a lot of people end up kind of graduating from there and kind of doing what I did, staying in Orlando. So there's an immense amount of recording uh, studios and competition here. So
Okay. Yeah, I bet it's it's probably highly competitive, isn't it? I mean, for if you're a recording engineer or a composer or whatever,
yeah,
you're in
yeah,
a hotbed. You're in a hotbed like Orlando, where I know there's a lot of activity going on, at least in film and TV and that sort of thing. That it must be highly competitive.
yeah. I mean, you got Disney and Universal, right down the street. But yeah, anything in the music industry is going to be highly competitive. And I mean, a lot of people get attracted to music in the beginning because it isn't super competitive when you start out. It's more of a team effort, but as you get into it professionally, man, it gets very competitive, and so
Did so given the fact that you really are just kind of getting started as a film composer, you've obviously had success in some other related areas. But now that you're getting started into composing for films, what's that process like to be able to kind of get your name out there and try to get some gigs? I mean, I'm just kind of curious, how did you market yourself?
yeah. So it's I'm not sure how many like beginner composers you've had on your podcast, but it might be interesting for your audience to kind of see that point of view from somebody who is kind of starting out. But yeah, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, after that scoring competition, I mean, literally the day after I entered that competition, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. This is what I'm meant to do. Just something about writing to picture, it brings something out in my writing. Like the picture tells me what to write, and it makes me write things that I wouldn't normally write. So anyway, so the day after that, I was like, "This is what I'm going to do," and I just kind of hit the ground running, man. I just I think over the past year and a half since that competition, I think I maybe have spent 3 days not writing music and not trying to find a gig. So just every day grinding, man. You know, 6, 8 hours in the studio. But kind of how I marketed. In the beginning, really, it's just getting your demo reel together and putting together, stuff for directors to see. So, probably the first 5 or 6 months was finding student films and finding, you know, either free work or work that was, projects I believed in.
Right.
And good quality stuff that I wanted on my reel, and then just wrote the best music possible, and did a bunch of competitions, some short films. I did Royal Jelly during the lockdown. I'm signed on to do 2 more features that I'm starting actually this month. So over time, you just build up your reel. And as far as like finding people to work for, I started off going to film festivals. That's a great networking opportunity to find
Yeah.
directors. Um, Facebook groups, honestly, was a huge thing. I joined a bunch of filmmaker Facebook groups where like filmmakers would post in the groups, like looking for a casting call or a crew member. and just kind of networked with them, tried to find gigs through that. And then, I would just go on YouTube and find, just type in short film and spend a few hours watching short films and making lists of the ones I loved and looking the directors up on IMDb and emailing them, and, like hundreds of emails. And, it's just networking, man, because it's really all about who you, really.
Yeah, that's what a lot of life comes down to.
Cliche.
The next cue you chose is from Tenet, which I've not seen, unfortunately, and I know I should, and I've heard a lot about it. The cue is called Rainy Night in Tallinn. You're gonna have to help me with this name. The composer's name is Ludwig
Göransson.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about why that ended up being amongst one of your favorites that you wanted to share with us today.
Yeah. So Ludwig, he did the music for Star Wars: The Mandalorian.
Okay.
And also Marvel's Black Panther. He's, to me, man, I feel like he's going to be the next, like, Hans Zimmer, the next big, huge,
wow,
composer. He's just phenomenal. And Tenet, Christopher Nolan, just amazing film. But this whole score, to me, is one of the best of last year. He does some really revolutionary stuff with reversing and inverting instruments. Because Tenet, I don't know if you're familiar with the storyline, but it's all about inverting time. Christopher Nolan, he did Inception and Interstellar. Right. All movies. They're just kind of like mind-twisting films. So the whole film has to do with, like, time inversion. So he does a lot of that with his music. Like, he inverts instruments or, like, reverses certain things. So the production quality, to me, is just amazing.
All right. Well, let's have a listen for ourselves. Again, this is from the film Tenet. The cue is called Rainy Night in Tallinn, and it's written by Ludwig Göransson. So you had this epiphany. I mean, I can relate to you a lot because I've had similar experiences. You had this light bulb go off and saying, "This is what I was destined to do." Um, so what's your approach of trying to score a film? In other words, what's the process like? I mean, do you read the script first? Do you watch a rough cut first? Do you talk to the director first? I'm just kind of curious if you could talk me through a little bit about how that process works.
Yeah, definitely. So, what I've kind of come to find out is when you get a gig, it's either one of two things. It's either we have the film done, we're looking for a composer. Can you start writing tomorrow? Um, or you get the gig when they're in the pre-production process and they're like, can you score this film? We'll have it ready in a year and a half. So you're either writing tomorrow or in a year and a half. So depending on one of those two outcomes, I always love to read the script just right off the bat before I even kind of agree to the film. Just to make sure it's something I believe in, something that I'm really interested in, and I like the concept. But man, honestly, you hear about composers writing music to the script, but man, for me, I almost like have to have the visuals before. Like I can kind of start coming up with concepts and ideas for the music, but I feel like I really need to see the picture to really like understand the colors and the textures that I'm going to use, because even the coloring of the film can drastically change the color of the music. So I really feel like I can kind of start preparing and come up with ideas and concepts, what instruments I'm going to use, what I'm going to base the score around, but I really can't start fully writing until I get the rough cut for sure.
So, do you like writing to picture? I'm curious. I'm trying to think of how I can ask this. Are you more influenced by the visuals or by what the characters are going through? Does that make sense when I'm asking?
Yeah, definitely. I think they work together. I think they are. It's kind of like a relationship. You kind of have to balance both. The visuals, but they also have to kind of tell the story of what the characters are going through. So I think they have to work together for sure.
Now, I find that fascinating. You're talking about all the textures and the visuals and colors and all those sorts of things influencing. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, music is so incredibly powerful. Have you ever? Well, obviously you have. That's a stupid question I was going to ask. So I'll ask it anyway. You've seen a film, a rough cut with no music. It's amazing how dead it is before you add music. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Music elevates it big time.
Yeah, for sure, and can take it in 20 different directions. It's so funny if you look up on YouTube. There's like people who rescore trailers or certain scenes in a
Right.
completely different genre. Like somebody scored the Shining trailer but put comedy music to it, and it just completely changes the entire feel of the scene. So yeah, I mean, uh, yeah, and it depends on the film as far as whether the director wants you to tell the audience what to feel. But some directors, they want you to just kind of heighten what the audience is already feeling. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So in other words, I take it in the beginning of the process, you sit down with the director and spot the film. In other words, where he wants music and where he doesn't. I'm guessing, and
Yeah.
and also what flavor, what kind of a feel he wants the music to be. Is that kind of sum it up?
Yeah, definitely. As just as detailed as possible. I mean, everything matters. And a lot of directors, they aren't what you call, you know, uh, they're not musicians.
Yeah, yeah. Of course
Say,
not.
so a lot of times you kind of have to interpret certain words or certain adjectives that they say that they might want. And you build relationships up with directors where you kind of understand their terminology and what they mean by certain words they use.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, there are few and far between, but there are some directors that have a musical sense or knowledge, but
Yeah, yeah,
by and
definitely.
large, a lot of them don't. So
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. Well, I mean, this next cue that you chose is not a surprise, given how popular this particular composer is. I'm talking about John Williams from the film Harry Potter. I guess the first Harry Potter, is that
Yep, the Sorcerer's Stone.
okay? The first Harry Potter. The cue is called Leaving Hogwarts. Tell us a little bit about why you wanted to choose that amongst your favorites.
Yeah, so I would probably say one of my favorite cues of all time. Just been always been a huge Harry Potter fan since I was little. You know, I got the books when they released at midnight since the first one.
Wow.
Yeah, saw the movies. John Williams, top three favorite composers. But yeah, so this not only is this an amazing cue, but there's tons of nostalgia tied into it for me. I just kind of like relate it to the musical equivalent of just wrapping yourself up in a big warm blanket.
That's a great description, and you're right. I mean, music really can sometimes transport you back in time to a place or a feeling or whatever in your past, and it can be very powerful that way. So yeah, I totally understand it. Well, let's have a listen for ourselves. This is from the film Harry Potter. The cue is called "Leaving Hogwarts," and it's written by the maestro John Williams. We'll get back to our program in a minute. This program is done for the love of film and film music, plain and simple. However, it does take a huge investment in time and in fees for me to make the program work for you. I don't sell commercial time and don't really want to on this program. Rather, I'm kind of like a public broadcasting station. I need support from listeners like you. For as little as $3 a month, you can help me offset the time spent in putting the program together. Or maybe you just think of it as leaving a tip in the tip jar. Either way, if you can join up, there will be bonuses, like an additional 10 to 15 minute segment with our guest every week. Well, we'll play additional cues as well as ask some extra questions. And it's going to be only available to patrons. How do you sign up? Well, it's simple. You go to patreon.com/what's the score, and that's all one word. That's Patreon. That's patreon.com/what's the score. Check it out. We'd be grateful for your support. That's patreon.com. I've not mentioned it before, but I should point out that bumper music you just heard was written by listener and friend Terry Wallstrom. Thanks, Terry. I've heard a little bit of your work. I played some of the things that you had sent that we're going to be playing here towards the end of the program, and I was very impressed. And what's interesting is that a lot of times some young composers' works that I've heard before are a little bit more, I don't know how to say it, techno, electric,
Yeah.
modern, and that's okay, that's fine. But yours strikes me as more of a classical golden age approach, and that's not a criticism. That's an opinion of mine, and which I happen to like. So I'm kind of curious. What composers have influenced you? I think you already mentioned one, but kind of talk to me a little bit about are there composers out there that you admire that maybe have influenced your quote style unquote?
Yeah. So yeah, I feel like I mentioned Thomas Newman. I mean, honestly, man, I feel like my influences range very, very. They're just all over the place. But yeah, I mean, the usual Thomas Newman, John Williams, Hans Zimmer, James Horner, just, all the classics. Ludwig is one of my new favorites. But I feel like, like you were saying, a lot of modern composers tend to go the electronic route. And I feel like I really enjoy that. I do. But I do enjoy doing the hybrid approach. Cause there is a lot of electronic stuff in the Royal Jelly soundtrack, but you're right. It is more kind of a classical approach. Particularly because the movie, the director right off the bat told me kind of wanted a more kind of dark fairy tale like feel.
Yeah. I can sense that.
Yeah. So that's I kind of went that approach with it. But I love doing like completely orchestra Disney type stuff. I love doing electronic. I love doing horror. Anything that just makes the audience feel something, I love it.
Yeah, whatever best fits the needs of the movie. I mean, and because I'm not trying to be critical of electronic techno.
Oh, yeah, me either. I love it.
But it's kind of a more of a modern approach, and then more classic. But whatever fits the needs of the film, which brings up another question. It's interesting. Do you? I mean, I'm guessing at this point in your career you haven't gotten to this point, but when you do, and I have no doubt you will. Do you want to? Is it more important that you write to the needs of the film, or write to make it listenable on a CD or a streaming service? You understand what I'm saying? Is it listenable outside of the film?
Yeah, always the film. Always what's best for the film. That's number one priority. Always.
Okay, yeah, and a lot of times, if it does fit the needs of the film, it's going to be listenable outside of that.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone as young as you can't relate to this, but my listeners know I say this several times every show almost, that there was a time, I'm old enough to remember, there was a time when, there wasn't DVDs or beta or VHS or streaming services. The only way you could relive a movie or a film that you've seen is either it gets re-released in the theaters, or you could listen to the soundtrack. And soundtrack, I mean, that you could relive the film through that music. And that was the only way you could do it. Now you just, I want to re-see I'm a big James Bond fan. I want to watch Thunderball. So you just plop it in the machine and go. But, back when I was growing up, if I wanted to relive that experience, I had to put the album on. So I'm just curious. It was, and I tend to agree with you. I think it's important you serve the needs of the film first. And, if it's listenable outside of that, that's an added bonus. Well, let's go into the next cue that you chose. And interesting, the composer, because I'm kind of interested in this gentleman. The composer, the work that we're going to play is written by Hans Zimmer, who is notorious apparently for using a team of composers. A lot of times it's not always necessarily originally all his work. For instance, I know a film that's coming out real soon. Again, my listeners will know I'm a big James Bond fan.
Oh.
The Bond film No Time to Die that's coming out has music by Hans Zimmer, but word has it that it's one of his people on his team that wrote probably the majority of the score. So I don't even know how he worked on this film. The film we're talking about is Gladiator, which is amazing. It's an amazing film and an amazing score. The cue you chose is called the Battle. In fact, you made a point of saying this is one of your favorite cues of all time. That's a pretty strong statement. So I'm curious. Tell me a little bit about why you wanted to choose that amongst your favorites.
Yeah. Yes. Hans Zimmer, man, just responsible for, to me, some of the best scores, in my opinion. And also kind of revolutionized the kind of whole hybrid score, like we were talking about, the electronic orchestra. Like the Dark Knight movies, the Christopher Nolan Batman movies. I feel like he really revolutionized that. But yeah, and I know he does work with a team. I know he comes up with kind of the main motif ideas and then has his team kind of flesh out those ideas. But Gladiator, I feel like, was a lot earlier in his career. I feel like he was responsible for a majority of this score. But yeah, man, I mean, just this it's kind of the same thing with Harry Potter. It was just a huge influence in me, huge film. I loved the film, loved the soundtrack when I was a kid. And just very epic battle scene. First kind of action cue I really fell in love with.
Yeah, and to your point, by the way, and it's not meant to be a criticism, he really has kind of revolutionized film scoring in the fact that he does have a team. No one else had that approach before, and so he's kind of revolutionary in that. So it's
like he produces the score, I guess.
Yeah.
You would say,
And so that's a compliment, not a criticism. Well, let's have a listen. This is from the film Gladiator. The cue is called The Battle. This is one of our guests' favorite cues of all time, and it's written by the composer Hans Zimmer. I'm curious, given the fact that now you're in the biz, as it were, and you're obviously a student of watching other films and hearing scores with them and those sorts of things. Are there, in your opinion, are there times when composers can overdo it? I mean, just write like too much music, or
Yeah,
not? I don't know.
yeah, I tend to do that a lot, honestly. I mean, I like, I prefer overscoring something and then being told to pull back, and then going through on the second pass and pulling back and taking stuff out. I would rather do that, than give something that isn't enough, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely, I can't think of any examples off the top of my head right now. But yeah, for sure, you can overscore it, you can underscore it. Just finding that balance.
It must be hard to, because I know I'm sure you put your heart and soul into it, and then when the director says, no, I don't want anything here. Is that hard to stomach? I mean, is it hard to get that kind of feedback?
Soul crushing sometimes.
I bet.
Yeah, especially when it's like, you score like 10 minutes worth of film. You put a whole like 40-hour work weekend, and 3 minutes of it is like this is like some of the best stuff I've come up with. Like, love this. And then yeah, like he's like, I love it all except for there's 3 minutes in there. No, it's just like, it's soul crushing. But what I've kind of learned to do is, I usually can kind of take that 3 minutes and cut it out and repurpose it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like recycle it, but honestly, you just kind of have to just kind of just go for it again. And a lot of times I feel like the second time is even better, and
I mean,
that's just part of the business, that's just part of it.
I'm curious, was there ever a time where you wrote something for film A that was cut out because the director didn't want it in there, and you repurposed it for film B?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there was a couple of cues in Royal Jelly that got cut that I ended up repurposing. Like, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
Yeah. They're great ideas, and might as well put them to use somewhere else.
Well, let's
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
It's not that, you have to realize, like, it's not that the music was bad. It just didn't fit what the director wanted for that scene. So, you can't take it personal.
Which I'm sure is easier said than done. But yeah, I think you're entirely right. And look, late in life, I became an actor, and trust me, I've had so much rejection. While I know it's hard not to take it personal, I still sometimes take it personal. But
for sure.
It's part of the deal.
That's art, though, and it's subjective. There could be 1,000 people that think it's the greatest song they've ever heard, and 1,000 people that think it's the worst song.
Yeah. The next cue you chose is, I'm not even remotely familiar with this at all. I guess the film is called Haunting of Bly Manor. The cue is called Perfectly Splendid, and the composer, I'm assuming this is more than one person. The composers are the Newton brothers. So I'm fascinated by this. I'd love to hear your description and why you wanted to choose that amongst one of your favorites.
Yeah, well, I really chose this because this soundtrack had such a huge influence on me for Royal Jelly. And this is a horror show that came out on Netflix probably around October last year. Really great series if you're into horror. But I'm sure when, if you've listened to it, you'll kind of hear the resemblance between, this sound on this film and and the score for Royal Jelly. But that's really kind of why I picked it, because it just had, it really had a huge influence on me for this whole score.
All right, well, let's have a listen for ourselves. Again, this is from the film Haunting of Bly Manor. The cue is called Perfectly Splendid, and it's written by the composers known as the Newton Brothers. So we're going to get into talking about Royal Jelly here in a minute. Well, let's get into it now. Tell me a little bit about how that project came to you and what it was that attracted you to it.
Yeah. So, um, this was probably in the beginning or right in the middle of the COVID quarantine, and either I had posted on a Facebook group, or Sean, the director, Sean Riley, he posted maybe on a filmmaker group looking for a composer. And I reached out to him, and we really connected because he's in the Mississippi area, and that's where I grew up. And he sent me the script, and I loved the script. Just kind of instantly connected with it. And then this was one of those gigs where he already had the film done, kind of wanted me to just start writing like the next day. So, yeah, we connected, read the script, liked the script, watched the rough draft, and then basically kind of started the next day. And, next, I think 2 or 3 months, I wrote it, recorded it, had enough music budget to kind of hire a couple of musicians. I got I got my good friend Yamalet to come in and do cello, and then my other good friend Brandy, she came in and did violin over it. So I scored the whole film and then orchestrated out some violin and cello parts for them. But everything else you hear is pretty much done in the box in my studio, either me playing guitar or keys.
Well, and I'm guessing too, I mean, using the keyboard, and with technology these days, you can recreate any instrument you want, I guess. Do you use that kind of a concept as well?
Oh man, it's amazing. Like I mentioned,
isn't it?
Spitfire earlier.
Right.
Yeah, the technology is just, man, it's come so far. Like I said, a lot of the TV shows and the movies you're watching, especially TV shows, are done in the box. A lot of the strings, the orchestration you're hearing, is done by using these sample libraries. they just yeah, they sound incredible, man.
It's
And
kind of a double-edged sword, though, isn't it? Because I feel sorry for musicians that might start missing out on work because well, we can just do it on the computer, you know.
right, well, a lot of them, what they're doing is they're blending the sample libraries with a real orchestra. So they're recording a real orchestra, but just to push it over the edge a little bit, they're blending in slightly some of these sample libraries. So like big budget films, they're definitely, and for me, if I have the budget to do it, you know, I'll even take out some of my own cut to hire a live musician because I believe, it will never sound as good as a live musician.
Right. Yeah.
Um, you know, uh,
So can you kind of give us a brief? By the way, I saw the trailer. You had kind enough to send that to me. It looks fascinating. It looks like it's really a cool movie. But can you kind of give me a brief kind of an overview of what the film is like, so that our listeners can kind of get a sense for it?
yeah, so it's kind of a play, a different kind of play on a revenge story, and just about this high school outcast kind of loner named Aster who's like really into bees. Um, and she ends up kind of getting taken under the wing of this mentor, Tressa. And Tressa kind of has these like sinister motives to taking her under her wing. A little bit of a creature feature, kind of a more so a revenge story. But yeah, it's cool. It's a great watch for sure.
Yeah, it looked incredibly creative. It struck me as that. Wow, this is a really neat idea, a neat concept. So I think
Yeah,
our
it's
audience.
yeah. The first act is great. The second act, it kind of takes you in these directions that you don't see coming, and like the last 15 minutes is just crazy and insane. Last 15 minutes, yeah.
Well, what we're going to do? We're going to play two cues from Joe's latest work from the film Royal Jelly. The first one will be the main title from the film, and also the next one will be Revenge. Now, I mean, and I'm delighted to be able to highlight your work. Is there a reason why you wanted to kind of highlight these two particular cues?
The theme, just because it's kind of the obviously the main theme of the show, kind of plays in the opening credits. You'll hear it right when you hit play. And Revenge, I felt like it's just kind of a good overview of everything. It's got a little bit of action, some soft emotional points, a little drama. I just feel like it takes you a lot of places.
All right, excellent. Well, let's have a listen for ourselves. These are two cues from the new film called Royal Jelly, and it's written by our guest, Joe Hodgin. So where can people see Royal Jelly? Is it coming out in theaters? Is it going to be streaming? Just kind of give us an idea about that.
Yeah, so it's available today. Actually, is the day it released.
The day, yeah, today we're
Yeah.
recording, and by the time this episode is posted, it'll already be out. Yep.
Yeah, it's on Amazon Prime. You can stream it on Amazon, and I believe it's a few other places, but I think that's the main online outlet you can stream it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So tell me what's in Joe's future here. What can our people look forward to beyond Royal Jelly? Are there other projects in the pipeline that you're wanting to mention to us at this point?
Yeah. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm always constantly writing. I'm honestly booked up through February or March now.
Holy smokes! That's great. Congratulations.
Yeah, awesome. I've got a feature film I'm doing. Super excited about this one called Did I? It's directed by Sarah Tice, and it's a psychological horror. And it's like a more of a realistic approach on dissociative identity disorder. So I'm really looking forward to that one. Great crew, amazing script. It's going to be a really, really good one. I'm signed on to do this feature called Woods of Ash, which is another horror film. And I've got like several short films lined up. I'm composing originals always, just to kind of hone in and practice my new techniques and skills. Constantly releasing singles and originals all the time.
Okay. And if people want to kind of stay in touch with what you're doing, or social media or those sorts of things, how do people find out more about you and keep in touch with what you're doing?
Yeah, so you can either go to my website, which is joehodgin.com. That's JOEHODGIN. Or you can go to any social media outlet. And just it's just /Joe Hodgin. So like if you're looking for my Instagram, Instagram.com/Joe Hodgin, Twitter.com/Joe Hodgin. So yeah, literally, any outlet, just type in /Joe Hodgin and I should have a page up on it.
Okay, well, terrific. Listen, Joe, I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I can't thank you enough for joining us. I'm very impressed with your work, and I think you're a true up and comer, and the best is yet to come. So I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Oh, my pleasure indeed. So that's going to wrap it up for us today. To our listeners, my appreciation to our guest, Joe, and I'm going to remind our patrons that we're going to do a bonus episode with Joe, so you'll get to hear some more of his work here in that bonus episode. But for those of you that aren't on a patron, you should become one. So please consider that. And you can look at our Facebook page on What's the Score to get more information on that. Anyway, so that's going to wrap it up for us. I guess there's only one thing left to say, and that's simply this. My name is Frank R. Wilson. My time's up. I thank you for yours. Thanks for listening to What's the Score?